right. Thank you all so much for being here. This panel, pulling this off smoothly, I think will be high degree of difficulty, but I think we can do it. It'll be fun, so I think we could just maybe jump right into things. On stage today, we have chains representing over 35 billion in TVL, billions in RWAs, billions more in daily DEX volume, serving millions of users, while also onboarding large institutions so they can offer their own customizable and secure block space. Clearly, by many metrics, the rollup-centric roadmap has been a success. I think we'd also agree the job's not finished and still much to accelerate on in the coming months in order to fully achieve the vision. The theme of today's panel, strengthening the L1, L2 foundation for the next decade of Ethereum. And my first question for the group is a two-parter. First part, it's been almost exactly 5 years since the rollup-centric roadmap was first published by Vitalik. What continues to give you the strongest conviction that the rollup-centric roadmap is the correct path for the future of Ethereum? And the second part to the question, a lot has certainly changed over the past 5 years. What, if anything, needs to be updated around how we think about the rollup roadmap in 2026 and beyond? Maybe we start all the way down there with you, Stephen?
Hey, great to be here, and really a fantastic question. If you look at the rollup-centric roadmap, and I've looked back at it actually relatively often, it's incredibly accurate. Like, if you actually was a fantastic roadmap that just really dictated how we behaved as a community for the past 5 years, and many of the things that Vitalik predicted happened perfectly. The problem is there are detractors out there that don't like the rollup-centric roadmap, mostly outside of our community, and they like to say, oh, you don't have a roadmap. Or they'll point to things and say, oh, L2s have tokens, or L2s have MEV extraction, so this is bad. But actually, if you go ahead and look at Vitalik's roadmap, he says, and I think for very good reason, it's great that L2s each have their own, he calls it little island, so they can all be the king of their island rather than everyone fighting over the same thing. It's great that they can collect MEV and also have their own tokens so they can fund public goods in a way that Ethereum wouldn't be able to do so. Vitalik makes these points like remarkably so, and if you look at the way it played out, we're really, really on point. I think the biggest risk to the roadmap today is that we look at those detractors and we actually forget that we're really, really on the mark. You can disagree with the roadmap, but anyone who's actually intellectually honest reading the roadmap will see that not only have we followed it to a T, we've executed excellently. And to the second point of your question, the thing that I think changed, I don't think we fully understood at the time why people would want L2s. Right, back then it was all about a scaling story. It was really all about, we have to add these generic L2s to add more capacity to Ethereum, and it's great for the ecosystem. But if you fast forward to today, there are many players, Robinhood on Arbitrum is a good example, that actually want their own chains as a first priority. And they say, we want our own chains. And that's something I don't think we understood, but it's actually extremely helpful and an extension of the roadmap because it says, hey, we can have all these people and keep them on Ethereum. And we have to remember that we're not fighting L2 versus L1 here. These are, if you look at where like Tempo and Circle are building, they're either going to build their own L1s or they're going to build L2s on Ethereum, and we have to work together to get them to build L2s on Ethereum, and that is the 2025 success of the rollup-centric roadmap.
I didn't think that I will agree with Steven so fast on the panel, but the question was what gives me confidence that the roadmap was correct, and the answer is we have demand for L2s from the banks we're talking to, from the businesses, from financial institutions, fintechs, big enterprises. There is a real product market fit that Vitalik anticipated with this visionary post so many years ago that now fully materialized, especially after the recent shift in the regulatory stance in the US and around the globe. And this is happening very fast. And some of these entities who are building these L2s cannot really do anything on public chains because they need privacy, they need certain compliance, certain rules, certain ways to comply with regulations, maybe putting data on their own servers, maybe putting something on the data centers in certain jurisdictions. And they can do this all now with L2s, specialized L2s, private L2s. And I think the one thing indeed that has changed since the inception of this roadmap It was initially about general purpose chains. And today, it's a lot more about specialization and doing things, competing to be unique in this space, like offering things that are uniquely meeting the demands of all of these various stakeholders that are building the chains. It's very clear that Ethereum is on the trajectory to absorb all of the values transactions in the world. Like everything that touches value in one way or another will come on chain. And Ethereum has materialized as by far the best settlement layer for all of these transactions. But all of them cannot happen on one chain. Like physically, by the computational logic and by the logic of business and regulation and everything, it's natural that if we are talking about millions of transactions per second, there have to be thousands of chains at some point.
Okay, so sadly, I also agree with what you said, so I won't repeat all of it. I think what gives me the biggest confidence is if you just look at the sheer number of chains, number of users using them, variety of use cases that are served by the different L2s on Ethereum right now. That I think is evidence to the correctness of this direction. I think there's a lot of place in the world both for public chains and for app chains, and you're always going to have different needs for different use cases or for different user bases, and for that you don't want everybody to run just on a single chain. So L2s do that, app chains do that. I agree with Alex. There are lots of specialization use cases. There are also some other types of cases. But all in all, it's pretty much a success, yeah.
Yeah, the one thing I'd add, I think, where it's clear where L2s are completely a success is if you look at the economic balance and profit and loss of all the alt L1s, right? Most of them are making no more than $100 in fees in 24 hours in revenue. And their expenditures, their economic security budget is enormous. It's in the millions. So if you just play that over time, right, today they're subsidizing themselves on tokens, right, this perpetual subsidy, that is going to run out. Whereas if you look at all the L2s, everyone here on this panel right now has a much more better profit and loss statement than those L1s. And so just naturally over time, you're going to see these economic forces kind of play out. And I think that's where the roll-up sort of centric roadmap has really benefited because, of course, as an L2, you don't pay the same in terms of economic security. And there are other revenue streams that you can generate as well as an L2 because of the connections you can have with your little economic zone. So I think that from an economic sense as well is really clear why L2s have kind of success.
Yeah, I'd say strategically it feels, can you hear me? Yeah. Strategically it feels like we are doing the right thing, the strategy is right. I think the opportunity probably for us is around execution. And I think that we have turned the ship pretty majorly over the last 6 months on that. And I think the clarity that the Ethereum Foundation and other leaders have driven around scale the L1, scale the L2, simplify the user experience has been really important there. But I think we all also need to kind of look ourselves in the eyes that this is day one, and if we want Ethereum to be at the center of the global economy that's being built, we need to continue to raise the bar for our execution. And I think one of the places where that probably needs to happen the most is around simplifying the user experience. I feel pretty confident in our track right now for L1 scaling and for L2 scaling. I'm really excited about Fusaka and all the blob capacity that we're doing. But then when it comes to simplifying the user experience, we now have this problem of there's all of these different chains. We are kind of in the middle of this EOA to smart wallet transition, which I think we can say, hey, it was great we shipped 7702 in Pectra, but then you look at adoption and we basically have migrated no wallets. And so I think if we want this kind of roll-up-centric roadmap to actually work, what we all need to do is we need to lock in and really make it so that we deliver on the execution over the next few years. And I'm excited about the stuff like 5792, simplifying the wallet experience. We're about to, I think, migrate a few million wallets from EOAs to smart wallets, which will be, I think, at the first large at-scale experience doing that, which I'm sure we'll learn a lot. And we're already seeing just from these kind of applications that there's work we need to do at fixing how AA is actually working, enshrining it, making it much more cost-effective for users. And so I just want to make sure we don't get too lost in the strategy and that we stay focused on the relentless execution that I think is going to be required in order to win.
Just to add very little, I think the thing that gave me confidence is that we stood by our values. We didn't compromise the thing that Ethereum actually provides, which is really robust, secure, crypto economic security to settle transactions. And we were able to sort of work on scaling without compromising any of that. The things that I like that I've seen over the last couple months, as was said, is that we're keeping to constantly constantly evaluating our core assumptions and like first principles around like what needs to be done and like reevaluating where we're at and where we want to go. And whether it's scaling, like whether it's account abstraction, simplifying the UX stuff, L1 stuff. So yeah, I'm just really excited about all those things. And I think like a lot of the things were said, so I don't have much more to add.
Hey, so I'm Mark from Optimism. And so the question is, why do we have conviction in the rollup-centric roadmap? So one way to think about it, very simple, it's just impossible to fit all of the world's users on a single machine. We can look to, history. For example, Google, they run lots of machines in the cloud to provide their services for users. So I just think it's fundamentally not possible to fit all the world's transactions in a single blockchain. So that's why the rollup-centric roadmap is good. We can spin up L2s on top of that, and we can send users to all these different L2s that have apps built on them that solve problems for those users.
Do you want to take a stab at the second part? What have we learned over the past 5 years that we should maybe update?
Oh,
or
yeah.
Are we all good to go and we just keep
No, we've learned so much. It has been a very long journey over these last 5 years. Yeah, I think one good thing that we could learn from the past 5 years is basically the users have changed a lot. Originally, years ago, it was just this hardcore group of users that would jump through hoops to use apps. But now we're at the point where we're starting to bring institutions on chain, we're bringing everyday people on chain, and I think that we should kind of go back to the basics and make sure that the roadmap that we set out is actually solving problems for those users. So I would love to see L2B work more with the users in defining the stages, relative to all of the potential chain operators, the people that want to run chains. Because if the Ethereum community is basically telling the rollups that they need to go in one direction, and all the possible institutions that want to run chains are asking for something else, it's creating this like weird sort of energy where we don't really know where to go. So I think that it's really important that we come together and we really align on what the roadmap should be and execute on it.
Awesome. Second question. One of the most important things for us to improve, in my opinion, is to better define the roles and responsibilities of L1 versus L2s on Ethereum, so we can better lean into the unique capabilities of each. We also need to better define the value exchange between L1 and L2. Many of us here have had conversations around this over the past months. Maybe we can start off with any general thoughts, if anyone wants to jump in, and how do you define the value exchange?
Yeah, maybe I can jump in. So I think for us, we really think it's about kind of putting your money where your mouth is. And that's why when we designed our transaction fee mechanism, we said explicitly we're going to take each transaction on Linea and use it to buy back and burn ETH, right? And this is just a practical reality where Linea would not be a success without Ethereum and without the value of ETH. So we really felt that, in terms of that value exchange, it makes sense that as Linea grows, we're providing that value directly back. So in terms of this whole alignment or whatever, it's less about the values and more about the practical reality that Linea needs Ethereum and it needs Ether to be a highly valuable asset. And we're going to help support that in tandem whilst growing Linea mainnet. So that's kind of how we see it.
I think we use the word ecosystem to describe what Ethereum is. So if it's a comparison to a living ecosystem, what's the relationship, what's the value exchange between the roots, the branches of the tree, and all the other parts? It's hard to quantify. It does not need to be quantified exactly. So the way we look at it is Ethereum provides the incorruptible foundation for this new Internet of Value that we're building. And the L2s have their specialized niches, kind of over, those are houses that people build on this foundation. And what Ethereum provides to L2s is, I think, quite obvious. It's the global settlement layer. It's the synchronicity, and it's the security and censorship resistance that we derive from it. Like, to be an L2, you have to derive your security properties from Ethereum, and you have to derive your censorship resistance from Ethereum. Maybe we're not at stage 2 yet, but we have to arrive there. And what L2s provide to Ethereum, I think people can look at it in different ways, but the mere fact that we're going to build an ecosystem that the entire world of value is going to use is already a massive contribution. Because in that ecosystem, Ether as the asset will play the central role for the store of value. Like, Ether is the best store of value in this ecosystem, way better than some breached Bitcoin. And like, what else can be, you know, the value of ETH is going to be driven by demand of store of value here more than anything else, more than any other economic reality, burning fees or whatever. So we should not even bother about that. And if the price of ETH goes up, then we'll have enough funds to maintain the public goods and do all the cool things Ethereum community is doing. So
I'm actually not sure I agree that like defining the roles and responsibilities of layer 1s versus layer 2s is that important. I think it might be interesting to us here, but it seems to me like the much greater challenge is like we're all building this technology that's trying to revolutionize a lot of things in the world. We're trying to get a lot of usage. Just you said, like, this is day 1. We're trying to get actual people to use it. We're far from being there right now. I think that's a lot more important than, okay, what delineates exactly the layer 1 and layer 2 and what's the exact exchange of value. Now with Starknet in the last, I think, year or so, we've spent a lot of time thinking of actually how we bring this wonderful thing, which is the world computer, to Bitcoin. So that brings something else into the equation. But I'm a lot more, I want to spend a lot more time trying to think how to get more people to use it, how to get Bitcoiners to use this thing, how to get Bitcoin involved, than mapping the exchange of value between the different entities there.
Sure. It seems like we might want to do both. How do we build towards a sustainable future? I agree that we don't want to over-optimize for the value exchange, and we are still clearly in growth mode, but how do we make sure that we're building towards a sustainable future without having some idea of sort of the role of each L1 versus L2? And
without what, sorry?
how do we build towards a sustainable future without understanding what the role is, for example, of the L1? And for like, maybe to be more specific, what sorts of financial activity do we want directly on L1?
I'm not sure I have a good answer to that. Reality will tell. I mean, people will eventually use different things where it's comfortable for them. I see it's already happening, right? So some of it will move between layer 2s and layer 1s, some of it will move the other way around.
I like to use the metaphor of like adding lanes on a highway. And we're at the point where we've added like, I don't know, 100 lanes. I don't know how many we have up here, 8 lanes. And I don't think we need to be prescriptive at this point about who goes in what lane, because ultimately we're going to process the entirety of the world's transactions through this highway, and we're going to fill up every single lane. And that's, I think, the beauty of what we're doing. And there will be differentiation, but there will be core DeFi activity that makes sense to keep on Ethereum. There will be, like Alex said, there will be specialization that only happens on L2s. You know, I guess one controversial take, we don't need more general purpose L2s at this point. We have a few of them, they're good. We have Arbitrum, we have Base, like really, really good general purpose L2s. I don't think, and others, I don't think.
Maybe we don't even need those. Maybe we just come back to layer 1 and put more activity on layer 1 and specialize everything.
I don't think so. I think you need lower cost block space, and we've seen, for example, perps take off on layer 2s, right? There were no perps on Ethereum layer 1. That took off on layer 2. Some of the things that, you know, Jesse's doing in the social space, really only took off. It never would have, it doesn't make sense to tokenize that many things at that cost on layer 1. So I think there are, even in general purpose, they have a focus, right? Arbitrum is a DeFi chain, and that has a very, very specialized focus. But to your point, this is a fair debate, but my point is, I think if we look towards the world's enterprises coming on chain, they don't need vanilla general purpose EVM, they need something that's very, very specialized. And that's like sort of the two ends of the spectrum. We need good general purpose, credibly neutral block space, and we need hyper specialized block space. And the important thing is, if you want to build a specialized blockchain today, you have two choices. You can rebuild the entire stack from the ground up and have to get your own validators and pay them all this money, right? You have 7% you take 100% of the transaction fees that come in, plus like 7% token inflation. This is what L1s do, just to pay for the security of the chain, whereas L2 security, and maybe this is a bad thing, we can talk about this, is about 96% of your transaction costs you retain, and 4%, so like 4 cents on the dollar you pay to Ethereum. Now, I think that's probably a little bit too low. I think we should probably be paying Ethereum a little bit more than that. But the idea is, if you're looking to build a specialized purpose chain, it just makes sense to build a layer 2, and that's I think what we should focus on. How do we get the world's specialized chains on Ethereum and give them the security of Ethereum and the convenience even of Ethereum security?
Okay, so I think one thing that L1 could do is have a product team that talks to the L2s. And this product team could be responsible for understanding the sorts of problems that L2s face when building their platforms, right? We had a bunch of chains, Circle and Stripe, they're the big ones, that they ended up launching in all L1. And, I would definitely prefer for them to launch in the Ethereum ecosystem directly. And so how do we learn from this and do some product research to understand what sort of features that L1 could offer to L2s to make L2s the most compelling place to launch a chain? Because the reality is that chains are still launching as all L1s. So we can't say that we've won and L2 is guaranteed to be the best place to launch your chain. But if we put some work in and really understand what sort of features L2s need, then we can make L2 the best place to launch your chain.
And this is something we do, by the way, in-house. We have Prism. I work at Optimism Labs. We have the Prism team building literally L1 consensus software for Ethereum, and we have the Arbitrum team building the layer 2. And we try to think about each other's needs, but I totally agree. In a broader sense, we need to think about this interaction, and even more so, we need to have this clarity. So when someone comes to anyone working at, say, the EF and says, hey, I want to build a chain, it's like, okay, you should build a layer 2 and you should be on Ethereum, rather than there being some like internal battle. You should build a layer 1. This customer sees confusion. They just say, okay, I'm going to go build my own chain. So I think I actually think we do need to clarify these roles, because we all need to be on the exact same page. And we might not agree, but we need to come around and realize that if we don't agree, we're all going to lose.
Shall we move to the next question? I think we are maybe a little short on time. How are we doing? 16 minutes left. What is your take on the current status of Interop? How much further do we still need to go, and what are the most important steps we need to take over the coming months to get there? So anything on Interop, feel free to take the question in whatever direction you want to go. I'd be curious, Jesse, what your take is.
I think we have a lot of work to do. My mic is not. Hello, test. I think we have a lot of work to do on Interop. I think it's from a simplify the user experience perspective, it's the place where we probably have the most opportunity. I think that upstream of Interop, I feel like we have to get people into smart accounts or make our existing EOAs smart. That feels to me like a pretty big blocker before we can solve some of the hardest Interop challenges and really make the user experience seamless. I also think we need to figure out how we can continue to lower the finality times for rollups. I think Mark's been pushing awesome thinking there around lowering the optimistic timeline from 7 days to 1 day. Does that make sense? I think that that's a conversation that's worth having. I think there's a lot of great research being done right now on, and just like, not research, productionizing of ZK and TEE provers to make it so you can have a faster while still safe stage 1 construction. And so, yeah, I think like smart accounts, lowering finality, and then continuing to push forward some of the open intent stuff that I know folks have been swarming on this week. I think what we're seeing firsthand from building the base app is that there's a huge superpower of having all of these L2s be sufficiently common that you can have the same smart account deployed across all of them. You can have the same transaction submission infrastructure, and it all mostly just works. And so I feel like we're like 80 to 90% of the way there. But as is with any product, the final 10% is the hardest. But I do think that kind of filling the gap on that final 10% is the opportunity and is a big differentiator for Ethereum and the ecosystem of chains built around Ethereum versus pretty much every other part of the ecosystem.
I see a mixed picture from my observations over the last couple of months, or actually a year since we first started conversations about interop. There's been significant progress made, especially around the standards for addresses, cross-chain transactions, and all of that. But it remained a relatively high level, and honestly, my impression is like everyone has their own priorities, and kind of like it's hard to rally everyone around this idea and push for this common goal because we're so different. And so for us at ZKsync, interop, since like our whole bet is there's going to be thousands, hundreds of thousands of chains, some of them private, some of them public. Like private, we're building, we call it previdiums with institutions. They really need interop. Like for us, that's the #1 priority, and we did not see this from the other parts of the ecosystem. So we just went ahead and we prioritized this. And what we also realized is interop heavily depends and is heavily interconnected with the properties of your stack. So different stacks will require very, very different approaches to interop. Like we could not do an instant trustless interop between optimistic and ZK rollups. We cannot do instant interop between different types of ZK rollups today because they use different proof systems and they have different latencies. So what we ended up with, we optimized our own stack, the ZK stack, with a not loss upgrade to produce blocks within 1 second. So like we have 1 second ZK finality. We can generate the proof for a block from the moment you submit a transaction to the moment the whole block is closed and proven with their bender in under 1 second. So this enables us to build interop which is completely reliant on ZK proofs and has no optimistic assumptions, no optimistic finality or economic finality other than the shared settlement layer, where we can be committing the blocks every second. And so we can build it in a very, very different way than if we were to think like, oh, how do we interoperate with optimistic rollups? We have to build all of these additional mechanisms, all of these optimistic ways to make transactions faster and so on. So we will definitely see this happening probably in Q1 next year. Our interop will go live and we'll see how this plays out. And hopefully there will be more interest and we'll be cooperating more on this front with everyone else. So we will be really happy. So like, if you guys want to talk ZK interop, reach out.
I think I agree with everything you said, that like every protocol is sort of building their own interop, but actually if you pop the stack, that means we don't have interop, right? Because if Arbitrum interop looks different than ZKsync interop, then we have 1,000 different interop protocols. If you ask me, modern interop, what we need in 1 word is wallets, in 2 words is smart wallets. And the idea is, you're right, there are these like all these different paths. You can use intents, you can use ZK to ZK, you can use any trust. We have, and trust me, I'm a researcher by trade, we have all these protocols, but you're not going to solve interop on a whiteboard. You're not going to solve interop by building a protocol. What you're going to do is you're going to solve interop by having a wallet that understands these 100 different paths and says, okay, if you want to go from ZKsync to ZKsync chain, I'll do this for you. If you want to go to ZKsync and Arbitrum, I'll do that for you. And by the way, we can iterate over time. So today we have intent-based solutions. I know there's the EIL is hopefully and the OIF, and there are going to be a lot of different upgrades that we can swap out the inner and say, okay, this is more trustless than before, and the user will get the benefit, but you can't expect the user to understand all these dependencies, because the reality is the users want to use every single one of our chains, and they need to just have a wallet that says, I will give you the best path between them. So I think interop, in my mind, is wallets, and that's why we're building zero-dev smart wallets to try to, and not on Arbitrum only, for all of Ethereum, to try to say, okay, how do we route interop in the best way possible? So the details that Alex and I have to understand, an average user that can't understand that or just doesn't want to, won't have to.
I agree with that. I think it's, a year ago, I took over working on Coinbase Wallet, which is now the Base app. And in the last year, the single biggest takeaway I have is I don't know how we could have kind of like learned as many, it would have been impossible to learn all the things that we've learned in the last year without also being responsible for a wallet. Like there are so many problems that we are now facing around account abstraction and smart wallets and interop and cross-chain execution that we are only able to identify and then only able to think about solving because we're responsible for a fully like kind of vertically integrated wallet and chain. I think World has been experiencing the same thing. It sounds like Arbitrum's seeing something there, but I do think it does go back to like customer centricity, where it's like you almost need to be in the fire to solve interop, and it's been surprising to me because at first I was nervous about it, but I think it's turned out to be a real blessing.
DC, do you want to jump in at all?
I mean, on the intent stuff, not necessarily, but like on the general account abstraction stuff, I do definitely agree. Like the smart account. So for all World app wallets are safe smart accounts powered by account abstraction for 337, most of them. And it's like 90+% of the transactions on WorldChain are smart account transactions. So yeah, it's definitely like a lot of the things that we have noticed when it comes to like scaling WorldChain are definitely driven, like the decisions we make are driven from the experience of building a wallet. So I definitely agree that that's like something that has been really, really important. And for Ethereum, I guess the best one is like if you issue an asset on Ethereum, it's like much easier for us to work with that than if like someone issues for interop specific things, right? Like we had a really hard time in the beginning getting any liquidity on WorldChain because the only token that was liquid was pretty much just WLD. And there's been like 1,000,001 ways that we've tried of like how to bridge assets. And yeah, it's been great to see like all the different developments around OIF and all these other things. So we have like a standard common interface that we as developers can abstract over to provide the customer experience that users actually want. Yeah.
You know, in a way, account abstraction also shows some of the limitations, I think, of interop. And I'm speaking from our perspective, like Starknet has been, like all accounts were account abstraction from day one. And like Starknet's live yesterday was our 4th birthday. So it's like 4 years we were only with account abstraction. When we started, there was no account abstraction anywhere else. So we went down that route because we thought it was a lot better, but that came at the expense of interop now, because now we're different than EVM and Ethereum and like the other L2s. So there's a trade-off there between standardizing and evangelizing.
So it looks
Yeah,
like we got,
I think
yeah.
one thing I just want to say is, I think interop is a scary word, and when we all talk about interop, what does it actually mean? So maybe one way to frame interop is use any app from any chain. You shouldn't need to go to an extra website to bridge. Like the idea of bridging should just go away, and I think this definitely plays really well into other people on the panel are talking about wallets. I do think that is a really key part of solving the interop problem. And I do think that it is possible to get to this point where you can use any app from any chain.
Just looking to see if we have any wallets in the audience. I think we have MetaMask somewhere, and a few other wallets are definitely here. So maybe afterwards we can catch up with some wallets and put some pressure on.
Yep.
We have 6 minutes left. Let's try to get to 2 more questions. How do you define the boundaries of the Ethereum ecosystem? For example, how to think about rollups versus chains that use Alt-DA. Clearly, there's real value in minimizing additional trust assumptions. why or why not, I guess, draw a meaningful distinction between roll-ups and chains that do not use Ethereum DA, and how should we be, L2B obviously plays a key role here, but as an ecosystem, how should we be thinking about this? And are there things that we've learned over the past 5 years or more recently that should update going forward?
We have to be careful as an ecosystem not to confuse chains that use Ethereum for their data availability, which have the most security that we can get, and also chains that use Alt-DA. But that doesn't mean there's not a place for both of them. I think a good analogy is iPhone versus Android. Right? iPhone ships one product. You won't find the Apple iOS and any other hardware. Android, you can find it all over the place, but users know the difference between a $1,300 Galaxy S25 Ultra and a $40 Moto G. And I think it's something very, very similar here. Ethereum is in the Android camp. We're allowed to lend our brand to things that aren't just the most, and by the way, layer 2s are that as well. There's no question that layer 2s, as secure as they are not exactly the same as Ethereum. They add additional assumptions. And Ethereum is lending its brand to a much wider set of things, and that's going to accomplish something very special, and it will have the Android influence, if you will, and actually give benefits to all of those, but we have to make sure that users don't confuse those, because then you'll get to a point where users just say, oh, I'll just use the cheapest chain. They don't understand that actually some things should be on a very secure chain. So I think we need to support it all, and we can support it all, but we need to make sure that we don't lose that distinction.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think, we're talking to some of the biggest institutions in the world about coming to Ethereum, and they literally can't use the DA today. So in that game, they have two options, right? Either they, come as an L2 and they use an alternative DA, or they go and have to do something completely different outside of Ethereum. So I think when we're talking about making sure Ethereum is successful, then if they're using an alt DA, it's totally fine with the sort of the mission to make sure that it's landing on Ethereum, in terms of the settlement. So them having a validating bridge to the L1, but posting their DA, whether it's on EigenLayer or some other sort of Postgres, I think it's less important right now. It's about making sure that they land somewhere in the Ethereum ecosystem rather than some of our competitive L1s.
So what is the Ethereum ecosystem? I think that any project or product that drives value to ETH is considered part of the Ethereum ecosystem. And the reason why I use this definition is that there is an objective measure that we can all look at and agree. Otherwise, we'll just all argue past each other, and it'll be impossible to agree on what Ethereum is.
Right, so if you consume an Ethereum resource, whether block space or execution space, or even storage like blob space and other things, then you're part of the Ethereum ecosystem because you drive value to it.
If you're buying, resources from Ethereum and burning that ETH,
that makes sense.
Or if you're, having your users hold ETH to be able to transact on your chain to use as gas, definitely part of the Ethereum ecosystem.
Where would you put an EVM chain that is contributing significant research and other contributions, but is not necessarily directly driving value to ETH?
Not Ethereum.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a fork of a different flavor of Linux.
It would be technical contributions, but not part of the Ethereum ecosystem, right? I can also use Linux and fork it and do whatever and not contribute to Linux. I'll do my own thing, but still contributing maybe some security vulnerabilities. I feel like it's sort of tangential to it, analogous.
But there's lots of ways to drive value to ETH, the asset. So even if you don't use ETH as the gas-paying asset in your chain, there's other ways you can still drive value to it.
All right. Last question then for the group. What do you see as the biggest challenge to Ethereum succeeding in providing real, unique, sustainable value to billions of people across the world over the coming years? It's a big question to end with.
Infighting. If we can't agree on a mission and a roadmap and something we can put out to the world ourselves, there's absolutely no way that anyone else in the world will be able to say, okay, this is the ecosystem I need to be in. That's the one thing that our competitors have. And it's a factor of centralization, by the way. The fact that we have represented on the stage here are 7 different companies with 7 different viewpoints, and trust me, a lot of us argue and disagree about a lot of things. That's the superpower of Ethereum, but it also makes it very difficult for us often to put a unified front out to the world. If you go talk to Solana, there's one company that you can talk to, and there's one person setting the vision, and that's extremely powerful when it comes to actually selling. So I think we have the superpower, but we need to get over that and make sure that we can actually, get over our differences when we get outside, realize we're all part of the same family, and put on a unified front in the world, and celebrate each other's successes. So if someone builds on ZKsync, fantastic, they're still in Ethereum, I'm still happy.
I'll add one more word, complacency. Like, we have not won yet. Ethereum is by far the best ecosystem in the world for the global digital economy, but we have a window of time to actually make it happen, and it can close, and we might face more obstacles down the line. We need to move really fast.
Yeah, the time is now.
I don't think the enemy is Solana. I mean, I think the main problem, which is both ours and theirs, I think, in a way, is that to this date, we have not found or built enough, apps or use cases that provide a lot of value that billions of people want to use and are willing to pay for. And that's a problem with the entire industry of blockchain, I think. It's not Ethereum specifically. Ethereum's probably done a better job than most, but it's still far, I think we're very far from actually doing that. So I think that's the main challenge. And by the way, I think the fact that they have a single person deciding it's both a benefit and a disadvantage, right? I think the fact that we are here, we have more diversity and more variety is both bad and good. It could actually end up in more things being built, but we're very far from there yet.
I think long term it's good, but if you can actually harness it correctly, but certainly there's a hurdle to get over, and before you get over that hurdle, having one unified vision is definitely easier.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Alex. I think, right now there are these corporations making decisions about where to put their businesses on chain, and they're deciding between Ethereum L2 and other options, right? And ultimately the outcome of that decision is going to have a huge impact on the success of Ethereum and Ether, because, again, if through complacency or through perhaps lack of unified vision, they do decide somewhere elsewhere. Our industry right now is incredibly small. Right, the whole entire crypto market cap is $4 trillion. This is insignificant compared to the total addressable market. And I think, again, if we don't realize that now and actually make sure they land in the place where it benefits everyone here in this room, at least in terms of the vision that we all somewhat share, maybe ambiguously, then I think that's the real key thing to get right.
I think the biggest challenge and opportunity is going to be moving up the stack and figuring out how we can build products that people actually want to use, and figure out how we can get those products in the hands of billions of people. There's other products that billions of people use, and we don't have it yet. And if we don't build those products, then it's not going to happen on Ethereum. And so I think we have done an incredible job building an infrastructural foundation. I think there's more urgency that we need to drive. There's absolutely camaraderie and winning together that we need to drive. And it has to manifest in products that everyday people love using. Otherwise, we're not going to win.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree with what Jesse says. I think we have very similar frames from the products that we're building. Yeah, essentially reverse engineer from what people want to see and what people want to use. Either we build them ourselves or we bring existing applications or institutions that already have the billions of users. So for example, we're trying to partner with Tinder, Razor, gaming, dating, social applications which have billion-plus user verticals, and bring those on chain. I feel those are sort of ones of the ones that are cool. So yeah, it's just essentially that, right? Actually onboarding people, and then you have economic sustainability from that.
Anything?
I think a giant risk is that we are not paranoid enough. The competition is extremely intense, and it's just getting more and more intense. And we're at this point where crypto is legal now, people are starting to use it, and we cannot become complacent and just think that we won. I think everybody needs to be trying apps in using them, in using that to drive what they're building. It's really difficult to build products that people love unless you are using the apps and knowing what's going on. So I think as a whole, the Ethereum community needs to be more paranoid about losing.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for having us.
Cheers. Thanks.
Q&A from the audience if you guys are willing to do it. We have a slight Q&A with the audience if you guys are willing to do it for like 4 or 5 minutes. We can do quick answers. If you guys want to take a quick seat. Sorry about that. Also, it was nice to hear the music playing. It's like while Mark was speaking. Awesome. So we have a ton of questions. I think since we don't have much time, maybe like 1 or 2 sentences, answers. We can just go around table, I guess, starting with Stephen and going all the way to Mark. Josh as well, if you want to chime in. The first one, what's your privacy roadmap?
We are very much investing in building private chains. If you actually look at the initial Arbitrum paper, it was as much a privacy solution as a scaling solution. The world wasn't ready for that now, but with enterprises coming on chain, people want privacy, and we're going to meet the moment.
Awesome.
We have privacy chains in production, such as the chain by Deutsche Bank, and we have others coming. Probably by the end of the year, we'll have a few launches of Previdiums with institutional privacy.
So the core of what we do started with zero-knowledge proofs. That's how we got the ZK rollups, and we focus mainly on scalability, but it's an excellent fit for privacy. And we're definitely working on it. I can't yet disclose what exactly, but it's in the works.
Yeah, so before we built Linea, we actually built what I called a partially anonymous ZK rollup. This was back in 2022. So we're sort of ready to kind of pick that off the shelf and like put it back in production. I think for Linea mainnet specifically, it's about, again, I think someone mentioned earlier about user experience. So having a great partnership with a wallet and showing privacy in that way is going to be real key for us.
We acquired the Ironfish team in the beginning of this year. We're going to add privacy natively to Base.
For us, we mostly use privacy on the identity side, so we're working a lot on client-side proving, essentially making proofs accessible on mobile devices, because that's sort of like, if you want privacy, you need to give privacy at the level of where the user is at, which in our case is mobile phones. And we're heavily investing into that, as well as multi-party computation, and we're really excited about sort of privacy solutions that also like have private state, but also like have better liveness assumptions that's just like purely one person keeps state on their own. Yeah.
The first step is to teach potential customers why privacy solves their problems and learn what sort of problems they face, and then help bring them on chain and integrate them into apps that solve their privacy problems.
Awesome. I mean, it's such a large problem for the world, and to hear all the leaders of the leading alto ecosystems talk about it in this way, it's incredible, and I'm sure the community is very happy. We had a lot of upvotes on that one. Okay, another one, it's slightly spicier, so we don't have much time, so this is the only one. Why are people opting to go for L1s like Hyperliquid, Tempo, etc., instead of launching L2s in your guys' opinion? Like, what do you think is missing? Is it a perception issue? Like, is it a technical thing? Where do you lie? We can go to the other side, perhaps, from Mark onwards.
Yeah, so one thing that we're hearing is around finality. Potential chain customers, they want really fast finality. They're also sometimes scared to hold ETH because it's so volatile. They want to use a different asset that they're more familiar with. Yeah, those are two major things.
Yeah, literally same answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say like even on L2, a lot of the corporations I've spoken to, they don't even want exposure to ETH. Like I think all these like L2s, like getting ETH exported to them is like not correct. I think there will be some that have the ETH, but I think it's more the finality point than the ETH from what I see.
So I don't think it's a single reason. I'll just add one more. I think some just want full control of everything that they do. They don't want to rely on any other ecosystem.
And I think the market incentives also play a role. And once people, so like the so-called L1 premium might be luring, but once they actually start paying the validators payouts, it's going to show a different picture.
FUD. concerted marketing campaigns against L2s, and the decision makers literally don't understand the differences, but they're told by someone else that has something to sell that L1s are better. And if you just look at the core economics, they're not. They're extremely expensive, and they're a lot less performant, a lot less secure, but they just don't understand that.
Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Bill, thank you all for your answers. Thank you all for this panel. Thank you all for stewarding Ethereum, pushing it forward, testing it, making it harder, better, stronger, faster for us all.